Welcome to Navigate STL Schools, a podcast. Today I am sitting down with Cynthia Chapple, the founder of Black Girls Do STEM. Cynthia, how are you doing today?
I am great. It is sunny. It is beautiful outside. I am in community, and so I am fabulous.
Awesome. All right, so I'm going to get started with the question that we ask everybody. What is your personal K-12 story?
Yeah, so I love this question because I think it helps people inform how I go about the work of Black Girls Do STEM. So I'm a kid that grew up in Chicago and went to Chicago public schools, right? Millennial, so in that millennial 2000 era, 90s transition. And my K-12 story is Chicago public schools was very Black. Right? Like when I came to St. Louis is when I first robustly in a big way learned about the widespreadness and the impact of like a desegregation program. Because as a kid growing up on the South Side, you went to your community school. I walked to K-8 around a block and a half away from where I lived at Hale Washington Elementary School. And all of my teachers, except for one, my fifth grade teacher, were Black educators. Some were young, some were old, right? My school was a museum, right? Like Hale Washington was the first Black mayor of Chicago. I grew up in an environment where I had symbols and knew that Black folk had done important things, right? There was never this sense of like not knowing my Black girl identity in that space, right? I tell a lot of people I didn't have a racialized experience until high school. Because I didn't leave my community as much, right? You know, I got to, as a seventh grader, go to the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana because my sister went there for college and like see outside the neighborhood that way. I had older siblings who lived out of state who I got to visit in Indiana and see places that way. But like going to school, it was Black kids, it was Black teachers, everybody was from the neighborhood. And again, it's a museum, so Ruby Bridges is on the wall, Mae Jemison is on the wall. Like it's Black folk everywhere, right? And the stories of these Black people in history. And so there was never a time in that experience that I didn't know that Black people were a significant part of American history. And I had educators who robustly believed in me and believed in my potential and capability. And I remember in fourth grade is when I fell in love with math. And it was because my fourth grade math teacher, and I'm still trying to like locate him. I located my fifth grade teacher, and now we're Facebook friends. So I said my fourth grade math teacher made me fall in love with math, and my fifth grade teacher made me fall in love with reading. She gave me my first Harry Potter book in fifth grade, and he robustly challenged me in fourth grade with these math competitions he would do. And it's like I always wanted to win, right? And so, you know, wanting to win and his emphasis on math just really lit something in me, right? The idea of like it's challenging, but when you figure it out and you win, it's exhilarating, right? Like, so he just made it fun to do math in that way. And so that's my experience early. High school, I would begin to say, is when I started to lose faith in teachers. But my early teachers, phenomenal, right? Like I remember those experiences as a fourth, fifth, even a sixth grader. I remember being in eighth grade. I was the eighth grade class valedictorian, and writing my speech, and my teacher telling me this isn't good enough, and tearing it up and saying you can do better than that. Like just this faith in me and this encouragement, and like always striving, not necessarily to meet a bar, but like telling me to put my best self forward, right? And I think that is the experience I had, where teachers just empowered you and they believed in you. And I also got spanked in Chicago public schools. So you also back in the day had those teachers that would hit you, you know, and some of my teachers were allowed to hit me via my mom and some were not, right? So I had some old school teachers that like have they stack of rulers and they gonna tear your legs up. I mean, I kind of used to be a terror in some respects. In like K3, I used to kind of do some stuff. But I just was high energy, right? And as much as they were of the old way, they still just believed in Black children, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think just had an awesome experience.
Awesome. So what is Black Girls Do STEM, and what inspired you to go on the journey to create this organization?
Yeah, so I went on a journey out of anger. if I'm gonna be honest, right? I think the first thing that happened was I just got upset. No, like, I'm being so serious. I was like, why is this? I was at a conference for a STEM, a science and math organization here in St. Louis. I was heavy in like STEM outreach and doing a lot of things in the name of gender equity. And I kept going to these events, volunteering my time, giving of my talent. And it's like, it's no Black girls here. And then when it is Black girls here, they don't go to SLPS. You know, I'm not going to name any universities, but like, it's around the corner. And we have this whole STEM school in SLPS around the corner, right? And somehow we're only getting minority girls from private schools all the way in the county, or from other private schools across the river, Illinois, or just other public school across the river, Illinois. So to me, that felt like there was somehow this disconnect and a population of Black girls not being served. And so I just wanted to know more about that. Like, is this real? Like, is these subset of experiences that I am having real? Am I imagining things, or am I just in the wrong place? Is there something happening for Black girls in STEM over there that I can go be a part of at this community center or here or there? And so I just started walking around literally in community centers asking people questions in St. Louis in 2018. Like, what program do you specifically have for girls? Do you have any programs specifically for Black girls who live in this predominantly Black neighborhood, for students that predominantly go to SLPS? And what I got a lot from executive directors at community centers was, well, we get a lot of boys through the center. They come to play basketball. They come to the game room. They come to the computer lab. Usually if we get girls, they're watching younger siblings, right? They have more responsibility, right? Even if they are only in 6th or 7th grade. Or they're just coming and they're worried about the boys. They're on the sidelines being the cheerleaders for the boys on the court. So we're not offering anything productive specifically for girls to do, right? And I think some of those executive directors was really honest and really transparent about that. We could do better. And so I started asking some folks at some facilities, hey, can I just pop up on a Saturday and have a specialized STEM activity just for girls? Let's just see who comes. And that is how Black Girls Do STEM grew into this organization that then became a nonprofit in 2019. It grew just out of the gap. I saw a gap. I went and asked about it. People were honest enough to admit that maybe this is something of value that could totally benefit the girls in this community. And then they said yes. Right? It was some executive directors at some centers in St. Louis that said, yes, sure. Right? I wasn't asking them for anything. Right? I was saying, I will come here. I will buy all my own materials. I will bring all my own stuff. Can we just talk to some girls that come through here, talk to some families in the community? Can we just see if they will show up on a Saturday? And that's really how we get on this journey now of building a robust nonprofit 4 years later.
All right, so before we dig deep, what is STEM education for people that don't know?
So STEM education is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which is the 4 categories of STEM education. I like to think of STEM education as like, how do we apply the science, the technology, the engineering, and the mathematics to the world around us, right? Like, I'm a chemist, research and development chemist by education, background, and training. And when I first started doing these workshops, I was still working a full-time job in industry, right? And so I had no plans of leaving industry to run a nonprofit. It wasn't even really on my radar at that point. But as a chemist, my thing always was like building or creating things that people utilize in their everyday lives to make their lives better, et cetera, et cetera. And I was able to do that every day. And so for me, it's how do we take the science? How do we take the technology and the engineering and the math? And how do we apply it to the world around us to improve not only our lives and our communities, but other people's lives and other communities based on the application of that type of knowledge? Not just knowing it, right? I can take a lot of tests and I can know things, but what do I do and how do I do? And I think that is the essence of what STEM education needs to be, to produce real robust problem solvers that can walk into a role in industry and create with a functional understanding of how it's going to be utilized in the real world.
So you kind of really went into like why you're choosing to focus on STEM education, but what are the benefits of STEM education, particularly for students of color?
Yeah, I think the benefits of STEM education for students of color is curiosity and imagination and the ability to dream.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I think so often Black children get put into these tracks or these categories or into these spaces that because they come from certain backgrounds or because they come from certain socioeconomics, that they are tracked into a space, a class, a position in this society. And I think STEM is about imagination. It's about tapping their curiosity. It's about having them maybe believe that there's something of value that they can produce and give and do and learn in this world, in this space that has already sort of counted them out at the bottom, if you will. And I think the other piece is the piece about poverty and socioeconomics. It is an opportunity to educate yourself into the middle class. And as much as we don't want to talk about that, STEM folks with science and engineering degrees are making 3 times the average of most people. I mean, nurses is about beating them out at this point. And some of the other health sciences careers, of course. But it's an opportunity to educate yourself into the middle class, into a salary, right, more than a livable wage, into being able to create a lifestyle and break some of those generational curses that might track you into sort of this low socioeconomic from which your parents come from which your grandparents come from. So I do think that that's a real economic driver that we should be presenting STEM in that way to our kids.
You spoke earlier about the idea of you doing a lot of work around gender equity, when, and that's what led you to start or to even notice the gap with women of color, particularly Black women in STEM. What challenges did you face as you were coming up in your STEM career, working in industry, and how are you helping young girls to prepare to face some of that stigma? I know a lot of what we hear is that STEM is for boys and robotics is for boys, and there are not a lot of women in labs and things like that. So what ways are you working to build up the confidence of the girls that you're working with through the program?
So challenges is self, right? My number one challenge, and some people will not like this, was undoing and unlearning my own socialization about my capabilities and about my value. And so what we have to do, because the world has not quite changed yet for our girls, is that when they start on that equal playing field with boys, we have to block these negative messages, right? Like, oh my goodness, I was just talking to my sister today, and she told me how my little niece was yelling at the screen when some YouTube show on engineering was saying, engineering is basically not for girls. And my little niece, she yelled out, "Black girls do STEM." Right? This is today in 2022 with a little 7-year-old Black girl sitting watching a TV and still getting the same messages. Right? And so what people don't realize, and I give this analogy often, we start equal, boys and girls. The capacity for learning and capacity for excelling in STEM, it starts equal. And then we put out societal messages, and then girls just drop a little bit more and drop a little bit more and drop a little bit more till they get to a point where they cannot imagine and see themselves over there because everything has told them that is not a space for them. Right? And so what I had to do was a lot of self-work. And so what Black Girls Do STEM is intent on doing as our top priority is self-esteem, self-worth, and confidence. If we don't do anything else well, girls need to walk away from our program knowing that they are capable and they are competent and STEM is a place for them, and that they have the physical aptitude to excel, to be problem solvers, to critically think, to face challenges. If nothing else, what we have to do is combat all of that socialization and all of those negative messaging as we deliver the STEM workshop. Because if not, we'll still be producing women like myself that go into these fields that have to constantly battle imposter syndrome and constantly reaffirm for ourselves our significance and need and the fact that we deserve to be there as much as anyone else. So I think like it is self-work. The challenge is undoing the socialization. And I want to say that that is a socialization that also harms boys, right? Because now I have been told that I'm good at this and I'm told this is for me and I'm told, right? And maybe I excel enough to get there, but I am also now have not done the robust learning, have not even also built the level of mindset and cognition to excel, because I've just been pushed along and tracked and someone told me this is what I should do, and so I just kept going, right? And so it is a socialization that men and women have to unlearn, that we have to work on with boys and girls, and that we ultimately have to stop pushing out. But unfortunately, the world has not changed even in 2022.
So what pushback do you get from Black girls do STEM?
Some of the pushback I get is like, why does there need to be a separate environment? Why does it need to be just for Black girls?
Or for Black girls,
right? Why does it need to be just for Black girls? You know, I think we say, oh, it's a cultural thing, right? Black girls need to have Black role model or Black women that come from their neighborhoods, that lived on their blocks, that went to the same school as them. It's a relatability thing, right? And people don't want to accept that, right? That like, you know, we Black, you can see it, you can be it, right? It is no accident that LeBron James came after Michael Jordan. And then it's no accident that Jason Tatum is coming after Kobe. Representation matters, right? And so it's a cultural thing, right? And so I think the pushback is people don't want to accept that these gender-specific spaces, and then we take it a bit further, these racial and gender-specific spaces are needed to affirm the identities that people have to exist in. Racialized identity is an identity even if it is not a valid truth. We live in these socializations, and until we're ready to let go of race, until we're ready to let go of gender as a binary, we have to make space for people to accept and affirm themselves through these lenses, right? And it's going to be about your connection to another Black woman or your connection to another woman or all of these things that people try to say, oh, well, we could just all sing Kumbaya. But then I have to walk into a space and I have to live in my real identity that's real to me, that has shaped my experiences, right? Yeah, it's not an objective truth, but does that change how I have experienced my life through the lens of as a Black woman, right? Because it's a social construct, does that make it less real? The fact that I walk into rooms and people say, oh my goodness, there's a Black girl from Purdue. No, that's happened. That's been my experience. That doesn't erase those feelings of like what that does to someone's confidence and what that does to their belief about themselves. And so I think people don't get that. And I think the pushback is, instead of understanding that the world has not changed, people want to say we've made progress. And that progress has been made, but the progress is simply not enough for a Black girls to STEM at this hour to not exist. It is in my hope that a century from now the world has changed. Absolutely. I hope we do not become a centuries old organization like some of our civil rights organizations that still exist today. I hope that the world changes, but right now that's not the case, and that's not the reality. And so Black girls need a protective space.
You mentioned a little bit earlier the impact of your teachers and things on your education. But the other thing that you really highlighted that stuck out to me is that there are school systems in the region that were sending girls to the program, but none of them were coming from St. Louis City schools. So what, in your opinion, is one of the biggest challenges that is facing education for parents that are choosing to educate their children in the city of St. Louis?
I think one of the biggest challenges for parents is really trusting that their child is getting a adequate education. I think that's the biggest challenge that I see and hear from parents. Parents want to know about opportunities and resources. They want to be included in decision making. They want to feel integrated in a part of their school district and their school systems. But parents also have to work, right? Sometimes multiple jobs. And parents also have had bad educational experiences themselves. So there's a level of intimidation that parents have when they go to a school and they try to ask a question and they don't get an adequate response, or they don't get any response, or there's a level of ridicule or a level of shaming that then happens to parents, and so they tune out. So I think the challenge really is not realizing the value of really building a robust parent support system to better support the district in the areas in which it needs to be supported, to offer better quality programming in school, out of school, in cooperation with traditional schooling to students and families in the district. And I think that's a really missed opportunity.
My next question is, as you're talking about parents not trusting in the opportunity, your sweet spot for Black girls do STEM is middle school girls, correct?
Yes.
How do you help parents or work with community centers or schools when we know that there are several high schools, the majority of high schools that are in the city of St. Louis that don't offer math programs beyond calculus? Like, how do you support those families? How do you support them in advocating to their schools? How do you support the community centers in supplementing some of that work?
Yeah, so, with our focus being middle school, we've just to a point built up where we're going to have like upper class high school girls this fall. And so thinking really strongly around some of that advocacy as well in this junction. I think like when I think about that middle school to high school transition of folks in the city, I think like what hasn't really been solid is the pre-exposure to math, right? For example, when we talk about mathematics, yes, there's some schools that only gonna offer you algebra 2, if that. You're never gonna see a pre-cal, you're never gonna see a trig, you're never gonna see even a calculus. But I think that like so many of the kids in middle school are not getting that pre-algebra or that like algebra preview, that it's not even a question, right? Like we can't teach parents how to advocate for SLPS to have a calculus teacher until we have kids that are robustly prepared to take calculus, right? And so, what does the district say? It's teachers. We don't have people to teach it. What will the district say? Oh, we only have 4 or 5 students from this school who can even enroll, right? And so I think like when you come up and you try to advocate for things, there's all of these excuses about the preparation and the readiness of kids in the pipeline. So I think as a organization focused on middle school, how do we robustly have pre-algebra or algebra in summer intensive something offered to our students so that we know we are putting them on the trajectory. So when they hit those high schools, they're going to want to take pre-cal. Right? They're on the path that, they're going to need pre-cal, they're going to need calculus, right? And so by advocating for this middle school exposure first, then building the pathway, then we're going to at some point be ready to advocate for like, how do we robustly make sure advanced math and science is available to every student who wants to take advanced math and science? And that's an access issue, and that's an equity issue. And it's just like the way we do recruitment is we handle our own recruitment, because we also don't want people just self-selecting kids from this building only into our program, because we run right back into the same tracking that schools are already doing that's not necessarily benefiting kids, right? And so I think you have to think about equity at every juncture of everything that you deliver, to make sure that the access points are readily available to all students and families who want to access that level of learning.
So when parents are strongly interested in STEM education for their children, what do you think that they should be considering or asking their prospective schools?
Yeah, I think when parents are really interested in STEM from a middle school perspective, they should just be saying, is my student going to see algebra as an 8th grader?
Mm-hmm.
Like straight algebra, not pre-algebra. If they come here as a middle schooler, will they be seeing algebra? Early access to algebra is huge, right? It's just huge. Math is the fundamental language across all of everything, all of the disciplines, right? And it is just that foundational piece has to be pretty solid, right? And so I think that's one piece. And then they need to be asking, will my student be able to get engaged in hands-on science labs? Will my student be able to engage in hands-on engineering design projects individually and cooperatively in a team, right? Because that's how real work looks, right? Like I didn't get to be a chemist and just stand behind the bench and not talk to anyone and work by myself and think things through. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to be somewhat of a people person, right? Somewhat of a project manager, a critical thinker, like all of these things. And so kids need to learn how to robustly believe in themselves and their ideas, communicate those ideas, talk with and come to consensus with other people as they create whatever it is they're going to be able to create. So like, what is the level of project-based hands-on work my child is going to see when they're in this building, in this school environment? Are they going to be able to come back and apply this learning and tell me how it relates to something I didn't know about? Right? Can my kid come back and tell me, you know what, let me tell you why you have acid reflux and give a scientific and explaining of acid reflux, right? Like something that basic, right? Like that is what we mean when we say, can kids apply their knowledge to our real lives?
So how does an organization like Navigate STL Schools support parents in that journey, either whether it be advocating for these programs to exist or finding these programs in their local schools?
Yeah, I think like so many robotics programs exist right now, and that is a huge value add, right? And so if you can get your child into robotics, absolutely check that box and look at schools who are checking that box. But ultimately, I think for Navigator to be the liaison, Navigate STL Schools needs to be going to school partners and needs to be talking to school principals and curriculum leads and saying, show me your STEM curriculum. Mm-hmm. Explain it to me. Have the Navigate team come in your building, in your STEM, in your science labs, and do a hands-on activity that students in this building will see. I think you all have to really understand what you're promoting to parents, right? Like I don't sign on to nothing unless I get it, right? Like you don't see me put my name on a lot of anything until like I think it's really the jam, right? And so I think I've got really excited about a lot of school models, right? They talk a good game. It sounds wonderful. I've looked over people's curriculum. I almost got on the board and then that didn't happen. So I'm kind of like not going to mention it. But like, I want to see it in action, right? And I don't blame people who say, can I come to Black Girls to STEM and observe? Like, can I see it? Right. And so I think as Navigator, if your parents don't have time to show up to things like that and do that level of hands-on. So I think Navigate can do that for parents, and you guys can really buy into what an individual building or school is selling and then actually see it in practice, because people will tell you beautiful things, lots of beautiful language, you know, and so show up and say, hey, give the Navigate team an overview, you know, create some type of STEM. STL is creating like a STEM quality rubric, right? Of like, these are the elements of what we consider quality STEM programming, right? Look into that and collaboratively, I think the region in like a ecosystem like STEM STL needs to be leading some of that and helping folks understand, okay, this is what quality looks like. This is what quality feels like. This is the element of joy that needs to be present in the environment that the curriculum can't bring, that the people in the organization need to bring. And that's what I tell a lot of people. There is an element of joy of girls just sharing space that happens at Black Girls Do STEM that is not about STEM. Mm-hmm. It's not about the science. It's not about, it's an element of joy in just community. And that's the intangibles when you think about these sort of program designs and these individual school buildings and some of the innovative models. So I think you got to get out in the community, right? And I think that's how Navigate really supports parents, by having a really deep understanding of what it feels like and what the student is truly experiencing in those spaces.
In those spaces, yeah. Speaking of spaces, a lot of your programs take place in North St. Louis. Is that intentional?
Yes, so Black Girls Do STEM came together and actually for the first time did a strategic plan in 2020 during COVID. And so we have strategic zip codes that we mapped out in the region based upon socioeconomics and based upon other factors. One of our top non-socioeconomic factor or points of contention is first generation STEM exposed. Mm-hmm. And we qualify first generation STEM exposed as girls who do not live in a household with a parent or legal guardian who has a STEM educational background or works within the STEM workforce. And that's because lots of the research say, right, that proximity and just access to a STEM professional, someone who is an engineer, who is a chemist, significantly impacts girls in a much heavier way than it does boys, and their confidence and their skills and their idea that they get to be in that field and do that thing, right? You hear women often talk about their parents or their dad or their cousin or their aunt or someone that they knew personally, right? Those personal connections are a little bit more significant for girls than you would just with students in general. And so that's a big piece of where we wanted to go. And so outside of just pure socioeconomics, we looked at occupation across our marketing analysis. And we looked at what are the occupations of people living in this communities. And we made some of those strategic zip codes based not on just raw socioeconomics, but on some of like the occupations that we did not see represented in those communities.
So all things considered, what gives you hope about the future of education, the future of girls in STEM in the St. Louis region?
What gives me hope in the St. Louis region is that like people are doing the work, right? That we exist, right? And I have to be hopeful that as long as I am doing this work with good intentions, and I know people like you are doing this work with good intentions, that the needle will move, right? Because we don't do this work not believing that the needle will move, right? I think you have to do this work from a place of optimism and from a place of faith and belief. And so I think the people power and just the willingness to stay in the fight even when it's not easy is what I think inspires me most, right? Like I feel so inspired by so many leaders in St. Louis, young leaders, Black leaders, other minority leaders in this space. So I think that is the value add. Like St. Louis has equity champions on the ground, right? And like I think we're committed to not just going away.
So what's next for Black Girls Do STEM, and where can people find you?
So of course, Black Girls Do STEM, we do our recruitment at the beginning of every year. And so our program is an 8-month community-based program, our STEM Saturday Academy. We work with middle school girls. And so our recruitment has closed. However, you can get added to our wait list right now for your rising 6th grader. So your daughter who will be a 6th grader in August, to sign up for the program for next year. And so that is one way to think about participating. If you have a student, you can go to our website. You can decide to volunteer with us. We're always looking for Black women in STEM as mentors. We're always looking for anyone else who believes in the mission and vision of our work to come and serve our organization in a multitude of other capacities. Look, if you believe, then we will use you, is what we like to say. But really, it's about mission alignment. And if everything you have heard has resonated well with you, check out our website, volunteer with us. And then, of course, like we have a monthly donation program. And so we ask people to be a doer and help keep Black girls doing STEM by making a monthly donation of $40 a month to sponsor one girl for the entire year. And so we would love for people to become monthly donors. You can also find that on our website and sign up there as well. But yeah, between signing your girls up, sharing the information around recruitment, sharing it with your schools, sharing it with your school counselors, we're really just in a place where we're just trying to like make partnerships and just do good work on behalf of students in the city, in the county of St. Louis.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Cynthia. It's been great talking to you. And thank you guys for listening. Have a great rest of your day.